hate, I'm defying. Hard labor, I came here to modify the system. Take them down if they ain't listening. Straight demolition. From young, everything resistant. Good times I don't really miss. Gotta pay the cost, no tick. Wick, this hard labor and I'm kicked. Never fit in with the crowd or got into politics. You can tell I'm built different. Trust me, it'll be a sequence of events if you touch me. Even when the women do it love. I've been eye to eye with great people, but you'll be mistaken if you put another one above. Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. I am your host Conrad Rogas. Welcome to an Easter Sunday edition. It is Sunday, March 31st. 2024. It's episode 69. I love when it falls on holidays because then I could make the point that, hey, we don't take days off. I will not take days off. And I've said before why is because the people we're fighting against don't take days off either. And we should really be doing more than the people who are causing suffering, death and suffering and injustice in the world. We need to be working harder than them, but we are not actually working nearly hard enough. This is like, we're the guy that's going up against Mike Tyson in the world heavyweight fight. We're trying to beat the champion, like Buster Douglas, upset the world and shock them. So what we need to be doing is working tirelessly around the clock, doing all this work. It needs to be like a Rocky movie as far as, getting the word out and working on ourselves to be healthy, to be happy, to be building strong families and communities. We need to be doing that and counting on the fact that the champions, counting on the possibility that the champion is going to get complacent and that we're going to catch him off guard, and that that luck or fortune or providence is going to be on our side. That's not happening, right? So nothing exemplifies that more than these holidays where people sit around, they wait, they meet with family, which is good. We need to do that. But around this time, around the holidays, you have all these things passed, all these laws are passed, and also you have straight up mass killings and human sacrifice rituals, which brings us to the topic of this episode specifically, right? Episode 69, I'm going to talk about the occult season of sacrifice again. I'm going to mention it again. I've mentioned it a few times. But it's not really about that as much as it's about women and children, because the holidays are a time for and about women and children. Otherwise, men don't really get excited about the holidays, right? Like, what's the point of all the eggs and all this stuff and the gifts? Like, we do this because we want to make the children happy and we want to make the women happy, right? So this is what the holidays are all about. It's about taking an extra day off of work and dedicating more time to where the time really needs to be, which is in the household. And this is who I do it for, right? This is who I do it for, the women and children. So we're going to go straight into it. Just like a personal, I'm going to give a little bit of personal tidbits of stuff because, people are watching. I assume you want to know more about the messenger and not just the message, right? So it's going to be it's been a difficult time. It's going to be a difficult episode because I get this feeling around the holidays a lot. I can't really pinpoint it, but I get a bit depressed. I don't have a good time around the holidays. And it just seems to work out that way. Now, I don't exactly know why. I don't exactly know what the dynamic is, right? It's a bit of a childhood thing but, everything is fine, just like everybody. I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to have the holidays. We're going to have some extra time to do what I want, and everything is fine. And everything is cool. And then as soon as I have nothing to do and I just basically have, I'm just relaxing, I'm just meeting with family, I find myself sitting there and then something doesn't feel right. So, and I don't want to totally run with that and say it's because of the state of the world, but that is where I'm going to take this episode, and it's why I mention it. Because I get the sense that, I'm sitting there and we're sitting there with family and everybody seems to be smiling and happy, and there's like this deep unfulfillment, there's this deep unsatisfaction with me personally. And it's this kind of a thing where I think, so that's it? We're sitting around here and things are fine, like everything is fine. because everything doesn't feel fine, right? So, and maybe part of this is, and why I was finding it difficult to do this episode, and I personally don't find it that compelling compared to the stuff I've been doing. It is good information, but it just doesn't get me going. And I think part of that is because I think about the stuff I'm about to talk about. I think about how difficult it is to actually explain, to actually get it through to people what the big deal is here, how big of an issue it is, and how present it is. It's like you're trying to describe the invisible enemy to people, but the enemy is invisible and they don't see it. So it's almost a sense of dread where you start talking about it, and I'm thinking back to what it's gonna sound like an hour from now when I finish this, and there's a good chance that nobody got it, So that's it. Those are some of the inner demons, maybe. Okay, but I'm going to go into the topic of the episode and the occult season of sacrifice. What is it? I've talked about it before. This is a time, March, April, May, really from, the vernal equinox to May 1st. All this stuff happens and you're seeing all these mass killings in all different areas of life, all different facets of life. And there's a lot, there's not a lot. There's some information about this. People do talk about occult sacrifice and all this. So I don't want to do a whole A to Z of it, but I'm going to prove first. My goal is to prove that it is done. So I'm going to go through a couple events. I'm going to prove who does it and why, because that's the most important thing. Otherwise, people don't even, they don't care about it. And then 3, what can be done about it, what should be done about it, what are we going to actually do. So I'll attempt to do that. It's hard to provide background about that. You kind of just have to go into it, in my view. But the reason these people do these things, the reason why people do human sacrifice and occult sacrifice, is because they're trying to harness the wheelwork of nature. It's like nature's biological clock. This is where the springtime is where life is springing up, right? So people who are devising these big evil plans, they're trying to take advantage of kind of that natural engine of life. People have said that it comes from the ancient, solar cult, and that the sacrifices were made to appease the sun god so that food would grow. And that's kind of like a primordial aspect of it. That's definitely, there's something to that. Where I differ from them, and I kind of just want to provide a different perspective, it's just about planning. Like it's about planning things, and if you're in power, you're planning ahead not to lose power. So you want to hit the ground running. You want to do things when it's the time for a new cycle of life to begin. And this is the time where you will do all of these things. You're actually going to do the opposite of what you would naturally do, right? This is a time of, rebirth and all of that. It's a time of new life. But then this is the time where people go completely contrary to that. Yes, in a way they want to take advantage of that natural energy, but really what they want to do is they want to turn it upside down. They want to make this a time of death when it's supposed to be a time of life. So, and I will show that, right? But before I start, I want to play 2 short videos just to kind of set the stage, right? On what the most urgent and the most deadly problem is in the world. What the big deal is. So, the big threat has always been the obsessive control freak men in power. All right, we're talking about these men in power, these dominators, these control freaks. And this has always been the problem. It hasn't been climate change. It hasn't been disease. It hasn't been, famine in a sort of sense where, oh my God, a shortage is going to happen. No, it's always man-made, right? So I'm going to play these 2 videos. Hopefully that goes off as planned. So we've got a bit of like a Inquisition museum, right? I always harken back to organized religion, right? When the Catholic Church was the Holy Roman Empire, and the Catholic Church that was the king, that was the ruler, the tyrant that was ruling over the land in Europe. And people don't realize, like, you just have to look at it and see what it was all about. What was with all these torture devices, all these elaborate things and schemes, and why did they do it? Really, anytime anybody had a free thought of their own, any woman that kind of went out of line, that wanted to be treated like a human being, that they were hanging them. They had, look at these cages that they left people to display them to the world. They put them in these cages exposed to the elements. Why did they do all this, right? To strike such fear in the hearts of people. I mean, this is so backward, and this is thousands and thousands of years. And I know it's Easter. I know, everybody gets super excited and choked up about Easter, but this is the history of this institution as well. So I'm going to talk about Christ. I'm going to talk about Christ's resurrection, because I resonate with that, of course, like, right? But are we just gonna brush over this? This is the history of our culture. Everybody says, I've had people tell me, everything that you talk about, natural law and all of this, it all comes from Judeo-Christian tradition, right? Judeo-Christian tradition is what created all of the things that are good in the world, all the cars, all running water and everything. And this is where I call big bullshit on that, because this is Judeo-Christian tradition. The Iron Maiden, the rack, the torture devices, that's just as much Judeo-Christian tradition as the Declaration of Independence, right? If that's the claim you want to make. So thousands and thousands of years, and there was no advancement at this time. The advancement came when you had the printing press, you had the Industrial Revolution, you had all of this stuff, right? And the church was trying to stop that at the time. And it's not really about church bashing. I'm just saying that these were the control freaks in power, and they were using the story of Christ. They abused this. They totally corrupted these teachings, and they set themselves up as the representatives of Christ. But were they doing anything Christ-like? No. They were doing this. They were doing a lot of torture and child sexual abuse, right? And the new forms, the new churches are doing their own forms of abuse. I'm still getting new people watching my videos because I uploaded the Adam Steed interview that was taken down of Mormon Stories. Yeah, I mean, good. People are seeing that, this is just another cult. This is just another cult, the Mormon Church, based on lies, based on fear. They want to get people to hand over their money, their autonomy, their minds, their hearts, their families, everything handed over to this institution. Next video. Hunger in Russia. The truth about starving Russia. One of the greatest tragedies of the human race. This is the invisible enemy right here, hunger. But why did this happen? This didn't happen because there was an actual shortage of food. It happened because of government policies. This is just like the Inquisitions. I mean, this is an abomination. Why did this occur? Because these people were sitting around, these control freak leaders, Lenin, Stalin, they all came up with these plans, sitting there, and there was no real issue. It's sitting there, these people are control freaks, they're creating these fantasies, completely going off the rails with reality, turning the world upside down. You look at this, you have lines of women and children for food, for grain. Why? Why did this stuff happen? It happened because of these government decrees where they started confiscating the grain that they were producing. So these farmers, they were producing the food, everything was fine, it's always been fine. They always had enough food. And now they were going to confiscate the food that they produced. So then obviously they stopped producing food, because what is the point? What is the point of you working if you're going to lose what you produce anyway? And just like that, you had starvation. You had millions and millions of people in Ukraine died because of that at this time. So this is where I'm coming from, right? Now, let me leave that there and go into the story this week that really inspired this episode. Thursday, March 28th. There was this bus crash in South Africa that was carrying Easter pilgrims, right? Christians, they were making an Easter pilgrimage over from Botswana to a town called Moria in South Africa. So this bus had 46 people on board, and the bus was going behind two other buses of church elders, and it fell off of this cliff, and it fell 160 feet into a ravine. So remember, I'm going to talk about ritual sacrifice, right? So, and I've mentioned this before. There's no way for me to prove to you that this bus that fell over a cliff is some type of intentional human sacrifice, but it's not the point. It's not the point. The point is you have these events happening over and over again, and I don't know about this bus specifically, but I can tell you about the ones that I can point to and say they were definitely human sacrifices, and you see repeating themes. Okay, I've done this before. But what really inspired the theme of the episode is that there was an 8-year-old girl that survived this bus crash. There were 46 passengers on board. There were 45 deaths, and this 8-year-old girl survived. Lauren Siako. You can see her here. And I'm going to talk about these other crashes and plane crashes where you happen to just have a little girl survive the attacks, survive the crashes over and over again. And the reason I talk about it is not that this is some kind of elaborate story or ruse. No, it is a story of hope, which is what Easter is supposed to be about. This is really a time of hope. It's a time of a resurrection, right? So I'll talk about that. It's not all doom and gloom on this one. Kabelo Joseph Salome, a local ward counselor and a cousin of Lauren's mother, said in an interview in Botswana that the bus had been following two cars carrying church elders. But when the cars took a turn, the bus failed to follow, suggesting that the bus driver was lost, said Salome, who had spoken with the elders. Police were investigating the crash as a culpable homicide, according to a statement, though they did not provide further details. Now, I include that just to kind of paint the picture. Hey, it was following two other buses, and then it just drove off the cliff, and the police was actually investigating it as a homicide. Just putting that forward there, and I'm going to put forward some of these things so you could just see that this can be made to happen. I showed the Twin Towers falling in the last episode. I won't run from the fact that a lot of these events, they're just straight up killing these people, and I'll talk about those events. But the point here is, many people are aware of ritual sacrifices, and many people have claimed that these soul survivor stories, right, that this girl miraculously made it and survived and is alive today, that the dark occult and the people who are the perpetrators of these events, these mass killings, that these soul survivor stories, they're put there to kind of tug at people's heartstrings, and that it's all made up. And to me, that makes no sense, because the point of mass trauma events is to completely break people's spirit, is to completely break them, to make them afraid, and to make them think that only control is going to keep them safe. So these soul survivor stories, on the other hand, they're recurring proof again and again and again that you can't keep nature down. You can't keep freedom down, and you can't keep love down, which is really what I'm trying to talk about here. And in fact, there are so many of these human sacrifice rituals that I've talked about: the cremation of care, the killing of the mother goddess, where they're killing a woman, like Princess Diana, or they're blowing up Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Cathedral. Notre Dame means Our Lady, right? All of these different shootings at Columbia, like Columbine, which I'll talk about. Columbine, anything that has to do with the white dove, right? They're really reenacting the killing of the feminine pure energy. That, like, the symbolism is like this pure white young woman, and over again that is sacrificed, right? It doesn't make sense for these soul survivor stories to be put as part of it. So my contention is that this is proof that nature is on the side of the free people. So let me talk about all these different soul survivor stories, because it is really kind of incredible when you think about it. It's only incredible when you actually see them and you actually think about it and track the stories, and not just give statistics. So I'll attempt to do that a little bit. Yemenia Flight 626, June 30th, 2009. It was a plane that crashed into the Indian Ocean with 153 passengers on board. 152 deaths. And then a 12-year-old, Baya Bakari, couldn't swim, right? 12-year-old, couldn't swim. She held onto a piece of the plane's wreckage for 9 hours in the Indian Ocean and survived. Well, what are the chances? Then Intercontinental Flight 256, January 11th, 1995. This is an airplane that exploded over Colombia with 52 passengers on board. No explosives were found, right? This is what they said at the time, because there was another explosion that they blamed on the Colombian cartel. But most likely what happened is the altitude meter was off. Now that's interesting, because again, if you wanted to do this on purpose, you just send them out with broken equipment. But you had Erica Delgado, 9 years old. She broke her arm, but then she survived with relatively minor injuries. 51 died. This 9-year-old girl survived. Then you had Northwest Airlines Flight 255. Really, this is the famous one because this was in the United States, right? It was in Detroit. It crashed. This plane crashed after taking off from the Detroit airport. 149 passengers on board. August 16th, 1987. And then you had a 4-year-old, Cecilia Sashan. She had skull fractures, 3rd-degree burns. Her entire family died on this plane, right? But she survived and she recovered fully. You could see her, there's pictures. She has actually a tattoo of an airplane on her wrist. So it killed everyone on board, plus a few of the people on the road where the plane crashed. So 156 people died total. Only one survived, and it was a 4-year-old girl. Again and again this happens, right? Then Lanza Flight 508, December 24th, 1971. This is a plane over Peru that broke up in midair after being struck by lightning. 92 passengers on the plane, 91 of them died. And then a 17-year-old, Julianne Kepke, a German lady, a German girl, she was 17. She made it 11 days in the Amazon jungle with like a broken collarbone, eye injury, and a huge wound in her arm. She ended up having like larva in her arm. Like she was pouring gasoline on her arm to get the maggots out. But she made it in that state 11 days in the Amazon jungle. Right, alive today. You could look her up. Then Aeroflot Flight 811, August 24th, 1981. This was a Soviet military plane colliding with this passenger plane in midair. Right, so it was a collision between two planes. And there were 6 people on that military plane, all dead. Right, fully grown military men. They all died. 32 people on this passenger plane, and 31 of them died. And then Larissa Savitskaya, 20 years old, was the only survivor. So, obviously, when people hear about, a young woman or a little girl surviving an accident, everybody, obviously, our heart It awakens us to that, right? But this one, they didn't let the story get out because it's a Soviet government. This is the Soviet Union. So they silenced this story. Why? Because it would bring embarrassment to the Soviet Union for being so incompetent. You got military planes crashing into passenger planes. So she was silenced. The first reports about the accident in the Soviet press were censored, saying Savitskaya had crashed in a homemade glider. Savitskaya was warned by the KGB not to reveal the accident to the public. She didn't speak openly about the accident until the 11th of January 2001. She was paid 75 Soviet rubles, which is $20, by the airplane company. So I'm just putting that out there so people realize, that these are, in my view, real stories of these people that these girls keep surviving these accidents. And I'm saying it's a story of hope, and really I'll wait until the end for my take on why I even am talking about this, right? Because this isn't your regular This Week in Tyranny. It's much more about, government action with actual government documents, right? But you can't really find it, right? So a lot of people don't even see this happening. Now they're all trying to cancel Aaron Rodgers again because he expressed, his doubts about the Sandy Hook story, and this is one of those things you can't even mention. You're better off talking about the vaccine than talking about Sandy Hook. But I've done that on the show as well. So JAT Flight 367, January 26, 1972. Now we're talking, this is my favorite one, right? A briefcase bomb blew this airplane out of the air, right? There was an actual bomb. Like, they found this one out, and there were 28 people on the plane, 27 of them died. And a 22-year-old stewardess, Vesna Vulovic, survived. Now, this girl, this gives me hope, right? This is why I'm talking about this. Her demeanor, her whole look, this is what it's all about, right? This is what it's all about on the holidays. Of course, she holds the Guinness World Record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. This plane fell out of 33,330 feet. 33,000 feet. The Yugoslavian Socialist government, of course, this is Socialist Yugoslavia, right? The 1970s, they blamed the Croatian nationalists. Who knows who set the bomb? The point is, somebody set the bomb. Now, she suffered a fractured skull, 3 broken vertebrae, broken legs, broken ribs, fractured pelvis, and these injuries resulted in her being temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, but Vulovic made an almost complete recovery. So she has all this, she's in a coma for like 4 weeks, falls out of this plane, and then she wants to go right back to being a stewardess as soon as she recovers and is able to walk again. But of course they gave her a desk job to avoid a bad look. Because this is what socialism is all obsessed with. It's obsessed with their public image, and really it's even if it was not a socialist company, they wouldn't want to let this girl who almost died from this plane crash to be a stewardess. But they gave her a desk job, and she was working there for a while. But then they later fired her for anti-government speech. Right, this is a fiery girl, right? She has a stone face. She looks like she said she attributes her survival to a Serbian stubbornness. But she was fiery, and she was always speaking out against the government at the time, which was super dangerous, and they could have arrested her. But the reason they didn't is because she was so popular at this time, right? So the eyes were on her, and this is, by the way, the safest thing to be in a censorship culture, in a culture that kills researchers for speaking out. You could, I risk my life with the things I talk about here, but the louder you are and the more people see you, the safer you are, actually. So this is why people tell me to be careful, and I just laugh. I'm like, you be careful. you should be worried because you're not really fighting back. The only safe thing to do is fight back a lot, you know. But I'm gonna go through this article where they interviewed her, way after this crash. Um, what did you do on your evening in Copenhagen, right, when she boarded the flight? I actually had all the afternoon and all the following morning free. I wanted to see the monuments, but my colleagues had a feeling that something would happen to them. Everybody wanted to buy something for his or her family, so I had to go shopping with them. They seemed to know that they would die. They didn't talk about it, but I saw, and I felt for them. The captain was locked in his room for 24 hours. He didn't want to go out at all. In the morning during breakfast, the co-pilot was talking about his son and daughter as if nobody else had a son or daughter. So I was surprised to see this. I guess stuff like this happens, but everybody just kind of had a bad feeling about the flight. And it might just be an intuition thing, or it might be a sort of thing where they knew they were being led into a dangerous situation, a situation where something bad could happen. And that could absolutely be done in these socialist nations. This is just the way things would go. What are your recollections of the day of the bombing, right? I'm just going to continue. I'm having like a million things run through my mind, but I'm not going to talk about them all. That's all it is. So, her recollections. We were waiting for the aircraft to arrive from Stockholm. As it was late, we were in the terminal and saw it park. I saw all the passengers and crewed the plane. One man seemed terribly annoyed. It was not only me that noticed him either. Other crew members saw him, as did the station manager in Copenhagen. I think it was the man who put the bomb in the baggage. I think he had checked in a bag in Stockholm, got off in Copenhagen, and never reboarded the flight. The last thing I remember is boarding the plane by the rear door and seeing a few women cleaning the plane. Then what is your recollection of the flight itself? Nothing. She doesn't remember anything about the accident. It just made me laugh. But back to what she saw, she sees this person looking different, and that this is the person that probably planted the bomb. Now, the reason I mentioned those first two paragraphs is because this is your proof of making an event like this happen. Now, this was blown up, so I'd say this is one of these examples of human sacrifice, and this is really how it goes. They deal with real people, and they send a person out there. They send one person out there to cause chaos, and then when they cause chaos, she actually has said that after this is when they introduced the X-rays in the airports, and of course this is part of what they want to do, right? This is part of global government mass surveillance, right? How long did it take you to recuperate? I came back to Belgrade in March. Then I stayed in the hospital there until June. In July, I went to a seaside hotel in Montenegro. A big company sponsored my stay. I had 1 month there with my therapist, and my mother and my doctors came to visit me every 2 or 3 days. Then he asks her, what did you do then? And she says, in September, I wanted to go back to work. So then he's like, you wanted to fly? She said, yes, I wanted to fly, but they said I was not healthy enough to fly. Reality was that I was healthy, but they didn't want me. They didn't want me because they didn't want so much publicity about the accident. Eventually, they did give me a job, but it was office-based. I was negotiating freight contracts. After 18 years, I was forced to retire primarily because my views about Slobodan Milosevic. I was trying to persuade my colleagues not to vote for him, and eventually my pay was reduced. When did you become interested in politics? So she says, I've never been interested in politics. I'm only interested in helping my nation survive. Everybody in the world thinks that Serbs are fighters, that Serbia is a bad nation. We are not like that. I am Serbian and proud of it. So I was always asking people not to go to war and not to fight against Croats or Bosnians because we are all the same nation. Looking back at the incident, how do you think you survived? Nobody knows that, she says. One of them said that I have very low blood pressure. I should have never been an air hostess, in fact. I had a lot of coffee to drink before my interview, so that when I had my medical exam I passed. Maybe my low blood pressure saved me. I lost consciousness quickly and my heart did not burst. So, look, the reason I like this girl so much is because this is just kind of a youthful optimism of life, right? She's speaking out against the government. She doesn't give a damn. She wanted to be a stewardess. And I say stewardess and not flight attendant because the reason she wanted to be a stewardess is because she saw her friend in the uniform and she thought she looked good. So she's like, oh yeah, I'll be a stewardess and I'll get to travel. You know, this is the kind of optimism and hopeful outlook on life that we're missing in the world. And I think that they don't want anybody to survive accidents like this, but they do anyway, because you can't really hold this kind of spirit down. And this is the spirit that we're missing. This is the spirit that they're trying to kill with all of these crimes and all these mass killings, like especially your Sandy Hook. What's going to kill our spirit more than seeing, small children shot full of holes, right? Like this is insane. But people are scared to talk about that. But obviously the elephant in the room is, well, who's doing these things? Clearly it's government, right? What are the most damaging things? What are like the most terrible things happening in the world? It's all this disease, all these people getting sick and dropping dead. Why are they dropping dead? We all know why, right? I'm going to talk about the vaccine, okay? But back to Vesna Vulovic, saying, I ended up in the Guinness Book of Records. I received my medal at a ceremony in London. It was there that I met Paul McCartney. I told him that he was the most fabulous man in England and that because of him I started flying. He was so nice, and I got to know Linda too. I was even invited to his parties. So, it's just a girl that loves the Beatles, met Paul McCartney. So then they ask her, did you ever get to marry? Yes, I was happily married in 1977 and then happily divorced 10 years ago. As reported by the Daily Record, Vesna later compared her survival to the survival of the Serbians as a whole. She says, we Serbians are true survivors. We survived communism, Tito, the war, poverty, NATO bombing, sanctions, and Milosevic. We only want a normal life. I just want a normal life. On December 26, 1972, doctors predicted Vesna would soon die of the injuries sustained in the explosion and subsequent crash. However, against all odds, she lived 44 more years. And this is the point, whether it's a plane crash, when it's a natural type of occurrence where you're counting on nature, right? No one gets to control who lives or dies, is the point I'm making. You keep getting these lone survivors, and they just happen to be, young women and like little girls and like children. And this is nature's act of perseverance, right? This is just what happens. They don't want this to happen. This is where the hope is really at with humanity. Because unlike human beings, the earth doesn't give up. It doesn't accept a state of servitude and captivity as a way of life. We do, and this is the problem with human beings. And this is why you don't see so many plane crashes and events like that are left up to chance. What you're seeing with human sacrifice events is that there are mass shootings, there are wars, and there are massacres. And I'm going to jump right into that, and I'm going to talk about those. All of these different March and April mass deaths. And this is really my proof. This is my, body of proof, just putting a few of them together, that this stuff really just happens every March and every April, and nobody really puts these things together. So April 20th, 1999, you had the Columbine shooting. This is like the original school shooting. This is the one that set off the rest. 15 deaths, right? Now, with some of these, I'm going to give the impact, because these all had a political impact. And every time you have a mass killing, there are multiple goals that they get accomplished as a result. They have the gun control agenda. There's always a political agenda that they're accomplishing. Oftentimes it's an economic thing where they're getting money transferred. They're doing all these GoFundMes. Political money is getting transferred. Different things, right? And then there's a purely ritualistic and occult aspect, just to get blood spilled. And this goes back to the ancient mystery religions and their fertility rites. But after Columbine, you had in 2000, you had federal and state legislation introduced that would require safety locks on firearms, as well as the ban on the importation of high-capacity ammunition magazines. Okay, they did that. Then you had Virginia Tech, April 16th, 2007. This was the next school shooting. Before school shootings were really a thing, you had Virginia Tech. 33 deaths, right? And after this one is where really there was a lot of international attention, international media coverage, and this widespread criticism of U.S. gun culture. That's the United States, and since then we've had so many more. But then other parts of the world, New Zealand, you had the Christchurch mosque shootings, March 15th, 2019, 51 deaths. So you had that happen on March 15th, and then on the 21st, Jacinda Ardern, she announced a ban on semi-automatic weapons. So that's the way New Zealand lost their guns. You know, just recently, these are the ones that are working. We're gonna see it again and again. Canada, 2020 Nova Scotia attacks, April 18th, April 17th of 2020, 23 deaths. You had these attacks, and on May 1st, in the wake of the attacks, Justin Trudeau, he announced an immediate ban on all these kinds of military-grade assault-style weapons. Really, we're just talking about rifles that are going to be able to protect people's families when it comes down to any kind of serious violent threat. So, New Zealand 2019, Canada 2020. They're getting it done. Now in Australia, you had the Port Arthur massacre, 28th of April 1996. That was 35 deaths. And of course, after that, you had the National Firearms Agreement between state and federal governments that was announced within 2 weeks of the massacre, and they actually created this National Gun Registry. So Australia was first. I'm starting with the English-speaking countries. You had Scotland. You had the Dunblane massacre, March 13th, 1996. That was 18 deaths. This is to this day the biggest mass shooting in Great Britain's history, right? And this incident led to a public campaign known as the Snowdrop Petition, which helped to bring about legislation, specifically 2 new firearms acts, which outlawed the private ownership of most handguns within Great Britain. Everybody talks about England's gun laws. Well, it's actually a Scotland event that did it. March 13th, 1996. Then in Mexico, you had the 2011 San Fernando massacre. And this happened between March 24th and March 29th of 2011, where you had 193 deaths. And really, this was a multiple day thing where they were kidnapping, they were pulling over tourist buses, and they would select people from the bus, and they would make them fight to the death. And then whoever won, they would take them as into the cartel to be like a cartel hitman. And this is right, like things like this are, it's not that they're unheard of in Mexico. Like another one, you had the Minatitlan shooting, April 19th. You had 14 deaths. Now 14 deaths is not uncommon in Mexico, but really what this one was different because it included a 1-year-old baby, right? So it's these things that are super drastic, or they're very shocking, and they affect, you know, a large group of people. And sometimes they're done through cartels, sometimes they're done through, you know, extremists, terrorists. It really doesn't matter, because the people taking part in these sacrifices and putting them on, you know, their reaches extend to all aspects of society. You know, the criminal, the military, all of this, right? So that's Mexico. Germany, you had the Winnenden school shooting, March 11, 2009, 16 deaths. In Germany, the German parliament passed legislation in June 2009 to improve handgun safety with an electronic nationwide weapons registry, increased age limitations for large caliber weapons, and unannounced random inspections in the homes of gun owners to ensure that the requirements for locked gun storage were met. And then obligatory biometric security systems should be introduced once technically feasible. So essentially they banned the guns in Germany when that happened. Then other parts of the world, you had Kenya, the Garissa University College attack. That's April 2nd, 2015. 148 deaths, There are so many more events, right? Like you could talk about the BP oil spill and things like that, but I'm really sticking to the ones that have a high number of deaths. More than 15 people. The smallest one that I included here was 14 deaths. And people don't realize, this is why it's not enough to just give statistics, because people don't realize how much 14 people dying is. One person died, then another person died, then another person, then another person, then another person, and then they killed another person, then someone else died, then another person died, then another person, and then another person, and then they killed another one, and then they killed another one, and another one, and then they killed another person, and that's 14th. That's your minimum. Each one of those people has a family, has a life, that has a whole line of ancestors and a life's effort and struggle to get them to this point. And then they just die in these senseless events. And this is what pisses me off, because clearly the government is doing these things. Different types of governments, the overt ones and the covert ones, and it's always been like this, Still, nobody's been made to pay for the damn Inquisitions. Nobody's been made to really pay for the starvation in the Soviet Union and Russia. These were millions of people, and nobody's held responsible. And on the other hand, I'm walking through the city and there's communist stickers on the fucking walls. They're building these bike lanes, and people aren't realizing that the United Nations is just the new. It's going to be the new reincarnation of Joseph Stalin. They're here already. It's the World Economic Forum. It's Harari. It's Klaus Schwab. These people. That they're still alive and well. India, you had the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The massacre on April 13th of 1919. Now this is 100 years ago, but I'm mentioning it because this was 1,500 people that they mowed down. These were anti-government protests by the Indian people under British occupation. And then they had them trapped, and then they just took out the mounted machine guns, and they mowed down 1,500 people, Now we're getting into real human sacrifices. In Vietnam, I talked about this on the previous episode, the My Lai massacre. That was March 16th, 1968. That's when American soldiers, young American soldiers, right? They slaughtered 504 women and children in the My Lai massacre. And they knew that they didn't have weapons. It was just, this is how human sacrifice works. It was like an orgy of violence, and this is what happens with these places, guys. This is not normal in these occurrences. And I got way more of these events. The Iraq War, when it started in 2003, it was March 19th. That was the beginning of the war. It were these bombings called the shock and awe bombings. That's how we went into Iraq. March 26, 1997, you had the Heaven's Gate cult suicide. The mass suicide of this cult, 39 deaths. Another one, March 22nd in 2019, was the Brussels bombings in Belgium. Then the same day, March 22nd, that was just a week ago, you had the Moscow shooting in the concert hall, right? A lot of March 22nd and a lot of April 19th and 20th. That's what happened. So April 19th in 1993 was the Waco, Texas massacre. In Waco, Texas, there was this standoff between this religious group and the government, and there was this whole long standoff and this military conflict. And then one day on April 19th, they just set them on fire, and the government still hasn't admitted it to this day that they set the building on fire, and they had 72 or 78 people, men, women, and children, just burning them to death, right? And then 2 years later, on the same day, April 19th, you had the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh, right? Then some of these other ones that people don't think of as human sacrifices, on March 21st, 1921, I talked about the Soviets and the starvation. That day, Vladimir Lenin, they had this document called on the replacement of the grain requisition by food tax. Because for the past 5 years, they had grain confiscation. I talked about this on another episode. They were just confiscating food for anybody that was producing it in the Soviet Union. And this was causing all this starvation. And really, it crippled the entire nation. And they had to switch it up. So then they did it on March 21st. They introduced a food tax. And really all that is they let people produce their food and actually keep it. They just had to pay them a tax. So what they really did is the communism wasn't working, is so that they really took a step back, and they actually called this a strategic retreat. And Vladimir Lenin, he actually had to let a little bit of capitalism go. He had to kind of concede to capitalism, because only free market and capitalism makes production possible. So that's what they did. And they did that on March 21st. Another thing that happened on March 21st is really the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. That's when we began to have all these lockdowns in 2020. It was the same day really throughout the world. I think England was the 22nd, United States, some places were the 21st, I believe. I believe it was the 21st in Illinois, and then California, New York. The lockdowns, that was absolutely a human sacrifice thing, because so many people died because of that. Because not having medical treatment, just from the fear, from being taken out of their way of life. This stuff was killing people straight up. All the suicides that happened, straight up killing people. And before that, it was March 11th that the WHO declared this a global pandemic. Declaring a global pandemic is essentially a death sentence in itself, because there really should. Microorganisms have never been a real threat to humanity, right? So when you declare something a global pandemic, the stress alone is going to kill many, many people, but where the threat does not warrant that at all. By April 19th, 2021, so we're talking about a year after, all the U.S. states had opened vaccine eligibility to residents aged 16 and over. So that was April 19th that they announced it, that everybody who's an adult is eligible to take the vaccine. That's another human sacrifice ritual. And the philosophy of vaccination, it's the same philosophy as Stalin starving half of Europe. We need to starve half of Europe because capitalism is selfish, and some people are starving because of it, right? Some people are having a rough time, so we need to. So that's how they justified it. It's the same kind of philosophy as terrorism and Nazism, right? It's like saying we need to blow these planes up and kill these innocent people because the government of this country is killing innocent people, and that's the justification, and it just makes no fucking sense. That's the philosophy with mRNA vaccines. We need to make the body produce this kind of protein because this kind of protein is dangerous. And when people are in contact with it, it makes them sick. Does that make sense? Right? And like I said, microorganisms have never been a threat to humans. The threat has always been with macroorganisms. We're talking about big government with big guns, big henchmen. The kind of threat that can easily be seen. It's always been tyranny. It's always been government. Today it looks different. Today it's a different kind of social pressure and bullying. Right? The kind of bullying that you can't call somebody this kind of language because you'll be ostracized. Right? Social pressure that you have to do this or this, you have to pay taxes or we're going to lock you up. But don't be distracted from the real issues, right? This episode is about the real issues. There's piles of bodies every day of the year, and there's these huge mass killings every spring, and then day after day, tyranny keeps taking more and more and more of this world. And this weekend we've got the Eastern. I'm doing this on Easter Sunday. And what does Easter mean? It means Eastern, right? The reason it's all about the East and the Eastern Star and Lucifer and all this is because the East, I always say this, it just refers to a star in its ascendancy. When something rises over the horizon, it's rising from the East. So East means life, and this is what the springtime is. This is the sun coming up. Okay, the sun comes up every day, but it also comes up every year. It's like the cycle. There's the cycle of the day, and then the cycle of the year. And this is the time. It's like March and April is like 6, 7 in the morning. So it's when the sun is coming up over the horizon and shining, and everything is waking up, and the birds are singing and everything. Okay, so the reason they are doing these things around this time is because anybody who is in power, right, like a feudal lord or a dictator, they're already fucked. Mentally, they're fucked. They're done with, because they're controlling people. They're ruining people's lives. They're stealing everything they have. So in their mind, they are completely obsessed with making their projects and their position synonymous with the East. They want to be that star that is rising in the East. They want to be forever young, right? That's why they're so obsessed with children, because they want to always be there. They never want to be in the West. They are not ready for the fall. And karmically, they're not ready for the fall, because these people that are in positions of rulership, these people who are killing human beings, sentencing them to death, all this stuff, taking their land, when they die, they're going to have to be responsible for their actions. They're going to be morally responsible for their decisions. So they don't want that, because that's not going to be a good day. For me, it's going to be a fucking glorious day, because I know what I've done. I know what I'm doing. So, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm ready for my day of reckoning. I'm ready for my day of resurrection. But these people don't want that. They want to always be being born, right? They always want to do these rituals around the spring times, because they want to keep being reborn. They never want kind of their joyride to come to an end, but it has to come to an end, because they're running from reality. This whole world is upside down. And really, the springtime is the time we should be making New Year's resolutions. It makes no sense to do them in the beginning of the winter, when we're not going to have the energy to really carry that through to its completion. So we should be making New Year's resolutions now. And all these kind of killings that I talked about, they're actually like satanic New Year's resolutions. They're making a vow that they are going to trample over these women, these people. They're going to kill innocent people. We're going to do this. We're going to keep them enslaved. We're going to keep everybody in fear. That's their God. It's not the sun god. It's fear. Yeah, that's what these Satanists are all about. It's way worse than Baal and Baal and solar gods and all of this. It's fear itself. These are their New Year's resolutions. So when all these little girls and young women survive, that is proof that it's not working, that there is somebody on our side. And we need to get to work to make sure we don't lose that. So a time like this, Easter, what do we have? What is really the dominant, I guess, ritual, the dominant mentality at a time like this? First of all, you have to mention Passover, right? Because that was before Easter. The story around this time, the Jews have the Passover, and I really have to just rant about the things I don't like about these two things, about Easter and Passover. With Passover, the whole idea of that being a holiday is because it's a celebration of when the Hebrews were led out of Egypt, and they were led out of slavery, right? By Yahuwah, by God. And I don't like that story, because it's a story of unearned freedom. There was no big revolution. There was no war in the Bible. this time, the story of Exodus, that's not how it happened, right? The way they were freed out of slavery and the Pharaoh let them go is because God put a plague over them and killed each one of their firstborn, and they didn't do anything, and they were let go, right? And this is the story, and I hate that story because it's a story of unearned freedom, and it does not happen like this way in nature. There has never been unearned freedom. You have to fight for it. This is a story of obedience, and that's all I'll say about it. And I just, you know how I feel about being soft and not really earning what you have. Where's the fight? Where's the struggle? Why are we celebrating Passover? We should be celebrating, actual freedom being obtained, like the Revolutionary War, the Haitian Revolution, the resistance in Poland, right? Actually making, or the Industrial Revolution. That was how humanity earned their freedom. It's going to learn to be scientists, to be writers, right? Not these ancient religious rituals, and what is really the mentality that they are honoring. The mentality of sheep. I don't like the mentality of sheep, right? And then Christ's resurrection. Now, better, of course, right? Because Jesus Christ is a real human being. He was a real human being who actually did something. He actually stood up to the whole world himself. Yeah. And my kind of Christians are the kind of people that they accept the hard work to try to follow Christ's example. So like I said at the beginning, it's not church bashing. It's definitely not the bashing of Christ. Because this is something that I'm trying to do. I see myself as somebody who is following in the footsteps of Christ, right? And this is why I say should openly. I don't pillow talk. I don't talk soft. I don't talk sweet. I give people the real shit, like Mark Passio says. So that's my kind of Christians, and they're out there, and shout out to them. But most people, they have savior thinking. They're just like the Jews celebrating Passover. They think no action is required, and that things are just going to get better because of the grace of God. And that's just a different flavor of that obedient Jew thinking. And that shit is disgusting to me. Because the way things get better is two ways. One, through great effort. Through great painstaking effort and big struggle. Like Juliane Kepke, the German woman who went those 11 days in the Amazon jungle. And if she would have sat down and prayed, she would have died. She would not be alive today. You would not know the story. She survived because she wanted to live, and through her great effort. That's one way things actually get better. The second way, things just get better through that, like Vesna Vulovic, that unbreakable, youthful optimism and love for life. There's the other side of the coin too. In many ways, this girl was just too cluelessly optimistic to die. And there is something to that. But hey, what was she doing? She was protesting against the government. She was risking her life. These are my kind of women, see? And we still have these in the world. And this is who this episode is dedicated to. It's dedicated to these kind of women. And really, I mentioned it's about women and children, right? But really, this episode is for the parents. Yeah, it's for the parents because this is who the holidays are for. There are all these stories of heroes, but there's rarely stories of heroes that had children. It's kind of like an unspoken thing. It's hard to write a great hero story about parents, just two parents having children and just raising their family, because it's not glamorous, and it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of this is intentional, that we don't have any heroes who are parents. And I'm hard on fathers a lot because I'm hard on males in general, because the males need to be who actually changes this world. You can't count on on these women to keep doing it, and that unbreakable, you know, female spirit. We're losing that. We're losing that because what are we giving these women to look up to, right? Like, we should be making things easier for women to, you know, not complicating the world for them. We should be a shining light for women so that, you know, so that they wouldn't be so confused by all of these ideologies and all these different government programs, because they would know the truth. If they had the real man out there, it would be simple. It would be an easy decision for them, and we would have happy families, right? We don't have that, but, you know, shout out to all the good parents, because this is how we all get here, and this is the real resurrection story. This is the real springtime story, right? This is about children. This is about that kind of optimism and really a hope for life, because this is what they want to kill in this world. They want us to not have hope. They want us to be afraid of having a family. This is all this stuff that they're putting forward in the World Economic Forum, all these sustainable goals. I hope you're reading in between the lines with the sustainable stuff, because the only thing that's really sustainable, according to the way this is put forward, is for us to stop having children and to just live out the remainder of our lives and die. And this is what they wanted to do in all of these. This is what the Soviets have tried to do. This is what the Nazis have tried to do. The Chinese communists and everybody throughout history. They just want us to stop. They want us to stop being happy. They want us to stop wanting more and demanding more, because we deserve more. And we will never stop. And this is the kind of youthful optimism that I think the holidays are all about. So why do I get depressed around the holidays? Maybe it's because I don't see enough of it. You know, I think we could all do more, right? But there are two sides of the coin, right? One is the great effort. This is what I try to do. This is why I'm here on Easter Sunday. But then part two is also to enjoy life, right? To enjoy the time you have with your family. So I hope everybody has done that. And I hope everybody has a great week. And I'll see you next week on episode 70 of This Week in Tyranny.
In this tournament, the chosen few shall be triumphant and the devil will be decapitated. So you can keep your ducats and your dresses. I won't be emasculated. In this world of scientific madness. Scientific madness. My status is the baddest.